A man discovers his ex-girlfriend and mother secretly manipulated doctors, bribed his boss, and ruined his finances. With $234 in unpaid bills, toy cars as eerie reminders, and neighbours whispering about him, he uncovers decades of lies. This shocking betrayal left him penniless, homeless, and traumatized, but eventually, he rebuilt his life and became a counsellor to help others. They clapped when my name was called, but all I could hear was the buzzing. Not applause. Not pride. Just the same static I'd heard in every panic attack since Carol convinced the doctor I was unstable. And as I walked across the stage at my graduation ceremony, 40 years old, starting over with nothing but student debt, I saw Amy, my mother, smiling in the audience. That smile. The same one she wore years ago when she swore she knew nothing. What led to this moment? Simple lies. Carol manipulated healthcare providers against me. My own mother silently watched as my finances were drained. My boss bribed sabotaged my career. And one night, over an expensive glass of wine, I discovered the second phone that unraveled everything. I met Carol when I was 30, to dinner in a downtown steakhouse. She ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, $187, though she said it was for our first anniversary, in advance. That should have been my first red flag. Who celebrates anniversaries before they exist? But I was lonely. My divorce had left me hollow, and she filled the silence with charm. She was a nurse, or so she said. Soft voice, steady hints, smelling faintly of hospital disinfectant. I told myself her work meant she was compassionate. In hindsight, it meant she knew exactly how to weaponize a chart, a prescription pad, a whispered note to a physician. Back then, my mom, Amy, warned me, "Charles, she moves fast, be careful." But Amy also had a way of being conveniently absent when things went south, so I brushed it off. The first real crack came during dinner at my place. It was 7:12 p.m. exactly, I remember, because I had just opened the gas bill. $234. Too high for a one-bedroom. Carol slid the bill from my hands, laughed, and said, "You're terrible with money, good thing you have me." I laughed with her, but my chest tightened. Back when I was 12, I'd overheard my parents fighting about Charles costing too much. That same shame flickered. I thought Carol was teasing. In reality, she was planting the idea I was financially incompetent, an idea she would later use to strip me bare. A week later, I had my first panic attack. Woke up drenched in sweat, convinced I couldn't breathe. Carol called me cold 911. I thought she was saving me. But at the ER, the doctor kept repeating the same words: unstable, paranoid, delusional. I didn't understand until later that Carol had whispered them before I even got there. The smell of disinfectant still makes me nauseous. I leaned on Amy. Well, I tried. She told me to trust Carol, that maybe the stress was getting to me. "She's looking out for you," Mom said. But every time I reached for comfort, she redirected me back into Carol's arms. At the same time, my job started slipping. Reports missing, emails lost. My boss, Richard, cornered me in the hallway one Friday. "Charles, I need you focused. These mistakes can't keep happening." "What mistakes?" I asked, heart pounding. He waved the folder. Inside, blank pages. These. I later learned Carol was paying him bribes slipped into envelopes. But in that moment, I thought I was losing my mind. The neighbours whispered whenever I walked by. I'd catch them, Mrs. Gentry pointing, whispering, "That's him, the one who had the police here." A corrupt officer had ignored my reports about Carol's interference, but the patrol car outside was enough to mark me as the crazy man. The whispers burrowed deeper than any insult. They made me doubt whether I deserved to fight back. The final straw before the avalanche, I found the kids' toy cars under the couch. Not mine. Not hers. Tiny Hot Wheels, scuffed. At first, I thought Carol had borrowed them from a friend's kid. But something gnawed at me. Later, when I dug through her bag, I found the second phone. And that phone contained messages, dozens of them, between Carol and my own mother. About me. About how to keep me compliant. About draining the last of my savings. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the $234 bill on the counter, the toy cars in my lap, the smell of disinfectant still lingering from the ER trip. I realised I wasn't just being gaslit by a girlfriend. My entire family was in on it. I hadn't hit rock bottom yet, but the floor was already breaking beneath me. I wish I could say the second phone was the end, that I confronted them right then. But when you've been gaslit long enough, you don't trust even your own eyes. I remember sitting there, the glow of the screen lighting up my living room, hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it. The messages were clear: Carol telling Amy he won't notice if you move the money in small amounts, keep him convinced he's overspending. My mom replying with a thumbs up emoji. I wanted to scream. Instead, I convinced myself there had to be another explanation. "Maybe they're talking about someone else," I muttered. My own voice sounded foreign. The next morning, Carol made me eggs. She slid the plate across the table, kissed my forehead. "You were restless last night. Nightmares again?" I stared at the yellow man, uneaten. My stomach twisted. "Do you ever feel like people are talking about you?" She tilted her head, smiling. "Paranoia is a symptom, Charles. We should adjust your meds." And that was it. Every question, every doubt, immediately redirected into mental illness. She had doctors on speed dial, people who trusted her word over mine. I couldn't even argue. Back when I was 12, I had night terrors. I'd wake up screaming, convinced there was someone in the closet. My mom, Amy, would rub my back and whisper, "It's all in your head, sweetheart." That phrase followed me into adulthood. When Carol used the same words, "it's all in your head," it felt like fate, like proof that maybe I really was broken. But deep down I knew. Nightmares don't leave toy cars under couches. Nightmares don't write text messages about siphoning bank accounts. Things escalated in ways I didn't expect. My boss, Richard, suddenly gave me fewer projects. One day he called me into his office, lines drawn. "Look, Charles," he said, rubbing his temples, "there are concerns about your reliability. Maybe take a leave of absence." "A leave?" I laughed nervously. "I've been here 8 years. What's changed?" He glanced toward his drawer, then back at me. "It's not personal." Not personal. I didn't know until much later he was pocketing cash from Carol to push me out. But at that moment it felt like the walls of my life were collapsing in slow motion. Then came Officer Dwyer. A corrupt cop in every sense of the word. I filed a report after realizing over $3,000 had vanished from my joint account. He flipped through my paperwork aside. "Charles, you've got a history of instability. If I take this to the DA, it'll look like harassment. Best let it go." "Let it go?" I balked, my voice cracking. "They're stealing from me." He leaned in, the smell of stale coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "Careful, son. Keep pushing this and you'll be the one in trouble." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just fighting Carol. I was fighting an entire network, people pride, people complicit, people who saw me as the unstable man in need of control. At night, I couldn't sleep. When I did, I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. Sometimes I swore I could smell hospital disinfectant, like it was soaked into my skin. I started having panic attacks whenever I heard police sirens. Even toy cars, the ones I used to play with as a kid, triggered something. My chest would tighten and my vision would tunnel. I tried therapy. Once. The counsellor, a kind woman named Dr. Patel, listened quietly as I unraveled. "You've been conditioned," she said softly. "Years of being told you're unstable has rewired your brain. It's not that you were brokenness, so they made you believe it." Her words were bomb and poison at once. If she was right, my entire life had been a manipulation. Meanwhile, the neighbours watched. Miss S. Gentry told another woman at the mailbox, loud enough for me to hear, "He's the one who lost his job. Police are always at his place." I walked past, face burning, hands shoved into my pockets. I caught my reflection in a car window, unkempt hair, hollow eyes. I looked like the unstable man Carol painted me as. One night, Amy visited. She brought lasagna, placed it on the counter like nothing was wrong. I asked her point blank, "Mom, why are you talking to Carol about my money?" She froze, then forced a laugh. "Charles, you're imagining things again." "No," I snapped, voice shaking. "I saw the messages." Her face went cold. "Maybe you shouldn't go digging through things that aren't yours." That was the first time I realized my mother was more than a bystander. She was an architect. By then, the bank account was nearly drained. The bills piled higher: $234, $312, $497. I sold furniture, pawned electronics. I kept the toy cars though. They were my only proof something wasn't right, even if I couldn't explain why. And yet, despite everything, I stayed. Because leaving meant admitting the people closest to me weren't just flawed, they were predators. And I wasn't ready for that truth. But the cracks were spreading. And soon, the whole facade would collapse. It all hit me on a Tuesday, March 14th, at 3:17 p.m. I was sitting at my tiny desk in the one-bedroom apartment I barely afforded, staring at the second phone again. I had spent months tiptoeing around reality, trying to rationalize the text between Carol and Amy. But that day, I finally connected the dots, and what I saw nearly broke me. Carol wasn't just manipulating my medical care. She had been orchestrating my financial ruin for years. Every hospital visit, every emergency intervention, was timed with withdrawals, transfers, and bribes to my boss. I realized the $234 utility bill wasn't just an oversight, it was part of a long chain of transactions designed to make me feel unstable, incompetent, and reliant on her. I called my bank, hands trembling. "I need the full transaction history from 2018 to now," I said. The representative hesitated, but within an hour, the evidence was undeniable: transfers, hidden accounts, and payments to Richard, my supposed friend and mentor. My boss had been taking bribes to sabotage my career. The person who handed me performance warnings, who questioned my reliability, it was all purchased. That same night, Carol came over, the smell of disinfectant lingering on her coat. She smiled, poured me a glass of our anniversary wine, and leaned close. "You've been busy, Charles. Stressful day?" I didn't respond. I just watched her, the anger rising like acid in my throat. I had nightmares for weeks after that. I woke up screaming, the taste of expensive wine still bitter in my mouth. Panic attacks became daily visitors. And yet the betrayal didn't stop there. I remembered the first time Officer Dwyer brushed off my complaints. Now I understood why. I dug through messages on the second phone text exchanged with him. "Ensure Charles doesn't file a formal complaint, it'll ruin him." The corruption reached beyond my family, police, workplace, even healthcare providers. And then the whispers outside my apartment made sense. Neighbours weren't just gossiping, they'd been fed narratives by Carol, by Amy. My reputation had been weaponized. The hardest truth came in small, personal details. I had kept the kids' toy cars from the living room floor, the scuffed Hot Wheels I'd found months ago. I later realized Carol had done this to other victims, leaving tokens in their homes as silent reminders of her manipulations. I wasn't alone. Others had been subjected to the same pattern: trust, medical interference, financial ruin. It wasn't personal, it was systematic. I documented everything. Screenshots, bank statements, copies of messages. I even recorded Carol laughing with Amy on speakerphone, plotting the next phase of my undoing. Each piece of evidence dug into my chest like shards of glass. Social isolation became unbearable. My coworkers whispered, thinking I was unstable or untrustworthy. Friends slowly drifted away. I avoided leaving the apartment because I couldn't bear the judgmental stares in the grocery store. Even casual conversations triggered panic attacks. Dr. Patel added new strategies to my therapy: grounding exercises, CBT for anxiety, MDO for trauma. Each session peeled back layers of emotional damage, revealing just how deep Carol's manipulation went. One particularly devastating afternoon, I saw Amy in the hallway of my apartment building. I froze as she smiled at me, acting as though nothing had happened. The neighbor's eyes followed us. I wanted to confront her, scream, throw the proof in her face, but fear and shame held me back. Back when I was 12, I'd been told that my voice didn't matter. That lesson had stuck for decades. I realized Carol and Amy had weaponized that childhood lesson against me, conditioning me to doubt every instinct, every word. I had been walking through life in a trap of my own conditioning, carefully set by people I trusted the most. Then came the revelation that shattered me further. While cross-referencing bank transfers and social security numbers, I discovered that this wasn't just about me. Carol had done this before to other men, maybe women, even colleagues of my own mother. They had used their charm, their influence, and a system of bribes and silence to ruin lives. The realization made my chest constrict. I wasn't a unique target, I was part of a pattern. The betrayal was bigger than my family, bigger than Carol. The scale of deception was mind-boggling, and it was beautiful, in a cruel way, in how meticulously they had orchestrated it. I sat in my living room, the smell of disinfectant faintly lingering from Carol's last visit, the toy cars on the floor, the $234 utility bill still unpaid, and realized something. I had been gaslit, financially exploited, socially isolated, and psychologically rewired. My nightmares, panic attacks, trust issues, they weren't just random trauma. They were the direct result of years of calculated manipulation. I cried for hours, shaking. The emotional scars would take years to heal, years of therapy and relentless introspection. But in that moment, I felt the first spark of clarity. I needed to confront this network, expose them, reclaim my life. The stage was set for the confrontation, the explosive climax that would finally turn the tables. But I wasn't ready at first. I needed to gather every fact, every proof, every witness. And then, the world would see the truth. Carol, Amy, Richard, Officer Dwyer, they weren't untouchable. The day I confronted them came faster than I expected. It was May 22nd, 2024, 10:45 a.m., and I was sitting in a sleek, modern office for a job interview, a counselling position at a non-profit that specialised in helping abuse survivors. Ironically, I was about to tell my own story to a hiring manager, who had no idea that the man sitting across from him had been betrayed on every possible level. I clutched a folder of evidence in my hands. Bank statements, screenshots of texts between Carol and Amy, copies of the bribes to Richard, and messages from Officer Dwyer. Even the toy cars were in a small box beside me, a visceral symbol of the emotional manipulation I'd endured. The interview started normally. The manager, a kind woman named Miss Holloway, asked, "Charles, why do you want to join our counselling team?" I took a deep breath, the taste of the expensive anniversary wine lingering in my mouth, a bitter reminder of how I had been manipulated. "I want to help people like me," I said. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. People whose trust has been weaponized, whose lives have been sabotaged by those they thought would protect them. She looked puzzled but intrigued. "Can you give me an example?" I leaned forward. I was manipulated by someone I loved, someone I trusted, a person who convinced doctors I was unstable, who orchestrated my financial ruin, and involved my own mother in the scheme. I slammed the folder on the table, the sound echoing like a gavel. Her eyes widened as I laid out the evidence, the messages, the bank transfers, the bribes, even the police officer's texts. My boss took cash from her to sabotage my career. My mother coordinated it, and this wasn't just me, she's done this before. Miss Holloway gasped. "Charles, this is incredible. Are you saying you're family?" "Yes," I said, voice firm now, finally steady. "They lied about who I am for 25 years. They left me homeless and penniless," the neighbours whispered. "The community shunned me. Every relationship I had poisoned." I could feel the weight lifting as I recounted the betrayals. Every detail sharpened like a blade. The $234 utility bill, the nights of panic attacks, the smell of hospital disinfectant, the toy cars under the couch, the bribes to Richard. Officer Dwyer ignoring my reports. She was silent, stunned, as if she couldn't comprehend the scale of deception. Then I saw the first hint of disbelief on her face. "You're serious?" "Yes," I said. "And I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm telling the truth, because this system, they thought they could break me, but I survived, and now I want to help others survive too." The interview shifted. Miss Holloway was no longer just evaluating me. She was witnessing a live unraveling of a life built on lies. By the time I finished, her expression had changed from disbelief to admiration. This is remarkable," she said. "You've not only survived unimaginable betrayal, but you've documented it, analysed it, and turned it into a way to help others. I've never seen anything like this." I nodded. Relief, pride, and lingering pain surged at once. It was vindication, but also devastating. Because to reach this point, I had to relive the trauma, the gaslighting, the financial ruin, the social isolation, the panic attacks, the whispers of neighbours, the betrayal by my mother, my boss, and even law enforcement. Weeks later, Carol found out I had applied for counselling positions. She called, voice silky and venomous. "Charles, I see you've been busy with your little therapy project." I didn't flinch. "I've been busy reclaiming my life, and you, still lying, still manipulating? It ends here." Her laughter was hollow, but I felt no fear. For the first time in years, I wasn't trapped by her control. I had exposed the truth. The fallout was immediate. Richard was fired after I submitted proof of bribes. Officer Dwyer was investigated. Amy refused to speak to me. Neighbours continued their whispers, but I didn't care anymore. My reputation, once shattered, was now redefined by courage and resilience. And then the final twist. While preparing for a therapy session, I received an anonymous email. "You're not the only one. There are others. She's still out there. Help them." It hit me this wasn't over for everyone else, but my story could be the spark for change. By the end of the day, I realized I had transformed from a victim of systematic manipulation to someone capable of empowering others. Every panic attack, every nightmare, every betrayal had shaped me. Yes, but it also taught me the tools of survival and resilience. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was preparing to thrive. Even after the confrontation, life didn't instantly fix itself. Exposing Carol, Amy, Richard, and Officer Dwyer felt like victory in theory, but in reality, I was a walking ruin. Weeks after the interview, I slept in a friend's spare room, my own apartment abandoned and stripped bare. The walls smelled faintly of disinfectant from memories of hospital visits, and every time I stepped outside, I felt the weight of judgmental eyes even if no one was watching. The $234 utility bill still lingered, a symbol of how meticulously my finances had been weaponized against me. Even small numbers carried trauma now. I had panic attacks when opening bank statements, heart hammering, vision narrowing, hands trembling. My chest felt tight as though every betrayal had physically implanted itself into my ribcage. I found myself avoiding mirrors. When I did catch my reflection, I barely recognized the gaunt, hollow-eyed man staring back. The social isolation cut deeper than any financial loss. Friends had abandoned me, co-workers avoided eye contact, neighbours whispered whenever I passed. Miss Gentry's familiar glare still haunted me. I could feel the judgment, the assumptions, the invisible sneer of lies Carol and Amy had cultivated. Therapy became my lifeline. I saw Dr. Patel twice a week, working through nightmares that involved toy cars racing toward me like threats, hospital hallways stretching endlessly, and shadows whispering betrayal. She guided me through grounding exercises, helped me catalogue my trauma, and slowly taught me to distinguish memory from manipulated narrative. Charles, she said during one session, these people rewired your mind, but that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've been weaponized. Medication helped stabilize the panic attacks, but nightmares persisted. One night, drenched in sweat, I found myself clutching the toy cars again. Each scuff and dent seemed like a scar on my own psyche. I realized I had been carrying this betrayal physically as well as emotionally. Months of therapy followed, unraveling the psychological knots that Carol, Amy, and the corrupt network had tied so tightly around my identity. Even my medical records were a battlefield. Carol's manipulations meant I had incorrect treatment, misdiagnoses, and prescriptions I never needed. I spent countless hours calling clinics, requesting corrections, and explaining inconsistencies. Each phone call felt like reliving the abuse, each receptionist sigh or pause a potential judgment. I developed intense trust issues not just with people, but with institutions themselves. Social consequences compounded the trauma. One night, at a grocery store, I overheard someone mutter, "That's him, the guy with all the problems." My chest constricted, and I felt the old shame from childhood flare up, the same shame Amy had quietly instilled back when I was 12. I ran to the car, slamming the door, knees shaking, the smell of disinfectant still haunting my memory. Even as I tried rebuilding, the betrayal lingered like a persistent echo. I would catch myself double-checking bank statements obsessively, questioning every word a colleague or friend said. The PTSD was real, palpable, and exhausting. Financially, I hit rock bottom. Carol had siphoned nearly everything. I had sold furniture, pawned electronics, and even considered taking odd jobs just to scrape together rent. Every dollar felt like a battle won, every bill a looming threat. The emotional weight of being penniless, homeless at times, and publicly humiliated was suffocating. And yet, in the darkest moments, I had tiny sparks of hope. Dr. Patel reminded me, Charles, trauma doesn't erase potential, it complicates it. Healing is possible. I clung to that sentence as though it were oxygen. Final blow came during a routine visit to my old apartment. It had been sold after my eviction. Walking through the empty rooms, I realized that the people who had promised to love and protect me had left me with nothing, not even a space that was truly mine. I sank to the floor, hugging the box with the toy cars, tasting the bitter wine lingering in my memory, and crying for hours. It was the lowest point, homeless, penniless, publicly shamed, physically exhausted, and psychologically scarred. The whispers of neighbours, the betrayals by those closest to me, the manipulation of my medical records, and the bribed police officer, everything converged into one crushing weight. And yet, even on that floor, drenched in shame and panic, I decided I wasn't done. I couldn't undo the past, but I could take the next step. I realized that survival wasn't enough. To reclaim myself, to heal, and to prevent others from suffering the same fate, I needed a plan. Recovery didn't come overnight. After hitting rock bottom, I started small, opening a new bank account under my own name, one that Carol and Amy couldn't touch. I took a part-time job at a local bookstore, just enough to cover rent, and kept a journal of every thought, every panic attack, every flashback. The toy cars stayed on my desk, reminders of the battle I had survived and the manipulations I had uncovered. Therapy became my sanctuary. Dr. Patel guided me through endless sessions that forced me to relive my nightmares in a controlled environment. I learned to differentiate between real threats and the conditioning implanted by Carol, my mother, and the corrupt network surrounding them. Panic attacks slowly lessened in frequency, nightmares became less vivid, and the weight of distrust in my own mind started to lift. We worked on financial trauma too. I meticulously reconstructed my budget, tracked every expense, and learned to set boundaries with anyone who tried to control or influence me. Each small victory, paying a $234 utility bill on time, refusing an unhelpful phone call, even grocery shopping without panic, was a milestone in reclaiming autonomy. Socially, I rebuilt cautiously. I reconnected with a few friends who had remained in the shadows, those who hadn't judged or whispered. I practiced speaking honestly about my experiences, rehearsing the words before meetings or casual conversations. It was awkward, painful, but necessary. The neighbours' whispers still stung, but I realised that judgment didn't define me anymore. The turning point came when I enrolled back in school, pursuing a counselling degree. I wanted to turn my trauma into something constructive, to help others survive manipulations and betrayals like mine. Each lecture, each practicum, was empowering. I shared my story carefully with professors and peers, and their support reminded me that trust, though fractured, could be rebuilt. I still carried scars. The emotional wounds took years of therapy to heal. Trust issues lingered. There were days I would wake in a cold sweat, toy cars scattered on the floor, taste of expensive wine still bitter, and smell faint disinfectant lingering from memories of manipulated medical visits. But I recognized these as signals of past trauma, not indicators of ongoing manipulation. Along the way, I began volunteering at local support groups for abuse survivors. I used my experience to guide others through panic attacks, financial betrayal, and the emotional labyrinth of being gaslit. I shared concrete strategies, documenting interactions, verifying financial transactions, and building safe support networks. Watching someone regain control of their life sparked a sense of purpose I had never known. The final symbolic act of reclaiming my life happened on the graduation day of my counseling program. Standing on the stage, 40 years old, diploma in hand, I looked out at the audience. Amy wasn't there. Carol wasn't there. But those whispers and betrayals no longer mattered. They couldn't touch me. I had rebuilt from the ruins, armed with knowledge, experience, and the resilience owned by every nightmare, panic attack, and therapy session. Now, I work full-time as a counsellor. I help people navigate the same traumas I endured: medical sabotage, financial manipulation, social isolation, betrayal by family, and the ripple effects of corruption. I teach them to document, to recognize red flags, to set boundaries, and most importantly, to trust themselves. The transformation isn't just professional. Psychologically, I'm stronger, aware of the scars yet unburdened by shame. I still keep the toy cars in my office, a quiet homage to the journey from helplessness to empowerment. I pour my experience into every session, translating betrayal into guidance, trauma into tools. Looking back, the $234 utility bill, the hospital disinfectant, the bitter anniversary wine, the whispers of neighbours, the bribes, the hidden fern, the toy cars, they were all markers of a life designed to break me. And yet, those same markers now tell a different story, one of survival, resilience, and eventual triumph. I am no longer a victim. I am a counsellor, a survivor, a mentor. I turn deception into insight, betrayal into strategy, and trauma into empowerment. The emotional scars remain, but they are badges of resilience, reminders that I endured the impossible and emerged stronger. And every time a survivor walks out of my office hopeful and empowered, I know the darkness I endured has meaning. My story, painful, haunting, and complex, has become a beacon for others. I am proof that even the deepest betrayal can be transformed into a life of purpose and healing.